Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Meet America. I'm Annie Griffin, your host, and this is a most tragic set of circumstances that I have to sadly report to you. And that is that the Trump administration is getting ready to allow perhaps 100,000 of our wild horses and burros to go to slaughter. The BLM, which I have been reporting for a long time now, has been very much ruled by the cattle industry, your meat habit. And the cattle industry has infringed upon the wild horse and burro rangeland and lied about their populations, lied about the fact that they destroy the environment. You know, nature doesn't make animals that destroy the environment. The only animal that destroys the environment are people. And before white man came to this continent, there was millions of animals, millions of them. There was 60 million buffalo, and there was 2 million horses, and there's fossils of horses, horse bones found in Carlsbad that date back thousands and thousands of years as proof that these horses existed and were part of the landscape. So when a horse is starving or when an animal is starving, they really don't go into estrus and get pregnant. Or if they do, they lose their foal. They abort themselves because they're just not healthy enough and they don't have the milk. And so the foals die, and this is what happens. But the BLM is in total denial of that. And so they are saying that these horses are overpopulated, and they keep rounding them up and they put them in holding. And now they're saying, well, we can't afford to keep them anymore, so we have to kill them. And how do they plan to kill them? Well, I just talked to Jason Luderman, who is the media person for BLM, and their policy is gunshot. And I said, well, how do you plan to shoot them? And they said, well, we'll tie them in a trailer, and then we'll have someone standing above them, and they will shoot them. Well, as you all know, horses move their heads very quickly. Their ears, if they hear something, they'll turn their head to hear what they're hearing. So if they're tied in a trailer, guess what? They're not really restrained, and so they're going to get shot. And so I am going to show you an example of a horse in a slaughter plant that, is not restrained. It's restrained as much as a horse is going to be restrained with the BLM. And it's going to be shot. So I'm warning you, the footage is very visual. And if you can't watch it, turn away. But you all that are eating meat have a responsibility to these horses, to suffer along with them, and to call your congressperson and Trump and everyone that you possibly can and say you do not want your tax dollars being spent to kill these wild horses, and that you know damn well that they are not destroying the ecology, even though BLM says that they have peer-reviewed studies that these horses are being damaging to the environment. I'm so upset I can hardly talk. That's what's going on. And they need these, when you call your congressperson, ask them to support the SAFE Act. That would stop horse slaughter in the United States, and it would stop our wild horses and our domestic horses from being sent and shipped to foreign markets for slaughter. And so that's the most important thing they can do. And if we don't have a huge outcry all over this country, our wild horses and burros are doomed. Our wildlife is doomed. And the only thing you're going to see out there is cattle. And it's all about your meat habit, folks. So please support private ranchers in your area that are raising beef on their land. If you can't give up meat, contact these private ranchers and buy from them. But don't buy from producers that are using public lands, and that includes Whole Foods, because Whole Foods advertises that they are using ranchers that are good for the land. Well, it's really not true. And so I have researched this myself, and I was not able to contact any ranchers. They wouldn't give me any names of any ranchers that were privately growing cattle on their lands. And so I've given you one example. I'm going to give you some information here, and I'm hoping that you will contact your Congress member. And I want you to know that $120 million is spent killing wildlife, and this is all in due to the cattle and livestock industry. They don't want predators, and they don't want any grazing animals competing with the land out there. So they basically have a whole eradication process going, and it's all because of the ranchers. So unless we start saying to the ranchers, we're not going to buy from you if you're using our public lands and abusing our public lands. We're going to buy from private ranchers who care about the ecology, who are doing their part, and even if it's a little more money, which I doubt it is, we are going to go that way. That's what we have to do, folks. And so the other thing is I want to thank Congressmember Panetta for supporting the SAFE Act, for trying to save our wild horses and burros. So if you can call your Congress members and demand that they ask BLM for a full evaluation of what it would cost to return the horses and holding to their herd areas and allow predators to reinstate themselves, and to make sure that the livestock industry does not infringe on the wild horse and burros on their herd areas. The BLM has this nebulous program where they say, oh, well, we have a herd management area, which they invented themselves, and therefore under that herd management area, they believe that they can remove all the original herd areas. Now, just to briefly explain, in 1971, the American people were so adamant. There were more letters written during that time than even the Vietnam War protests to save our wild horses and burros. So the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act was formed, and BLM was mandated to go out and find out where all the wild horses were in all the states. And they did this, and they came back and they found there was 53 million acres where these horses existed, and those were called herd areas for the wild horses. And under that Wild Horse and Free Roaming Burro Act, BLM was mandated to manage these horses. And under rangeland, the horses were given devoted principal presence. That means they were given their more share, first lion's share of the food and water on those herd areas. And livestock and other multiple uses were underneath that. It didn't say that livestock got devoted principal presence. It said that the wild horses and burros got devoted principal presence. So I'm trying to explain all this to you, and I know it's boring to have to watch Talking Head, but this is so urgent because Trump right now, in the 2018 budget, there is plans to sell all these wild horses and holding to anyone who wants to buy them. That includes any slaughter person, a kill buyer. This is exactly what the cattle ranchers have wanted. And now it's happening, all because of your meat karma, your meat habit, all because of these people that just go to Burger King and guzzle these burgers like it means nothing. But it means so much. And all you have to do, folks out there, is to, if you are going to be meat eaters, to just to do your warrior part. Warrior up, America. Don't be this guzzling little, I don't know what to call you anymore, but you're just not warrioring up, and you're not paying attention, and you're just guzzling down these resources like they mean nothing to you. And the karma comes back, and you get heart attacks, and you get diseases such as mad cow, which is really Alzheimer's, and you get all these other things that are happening to you, and then there's no help because there's not enough health care. All the karma is coming back to you. It's all coming back. And so believe me, just by warring up and doing something for the Great Spirit, for God, for whatever you want to call it, it's going to come back to us in a better planet. And one of the most important things is our wild horses, because they fertilize the earth and they reseed what they eat. Their digestive system does not destroy the seeds that they consume, unlike cattle. Because the cattle, they have 4 stomachs, and so they really digest their food in a way that they don't reseed what they eat. And so that's the difference, and that's the big lie. So it's so important to get your congressperson to co-sponsor the SAFE Act. There's the number. And then also on top of that, you need to contact Congressman Adderholt by the thousands, because he's the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and he needs to hear from people that you would rather have these horses returned to their herd areas and to live out their lives in a natural way to refertilize the earth, as opposed to selling them off and killing them. And that's the proposal right now, basically. And this is what Trump is just listening to the BLM himself. And so he's going, oh yes, I guess you just can't afford these horses anymore, so let's slaughter them all. And so this is the way BLM plans to slaughter them in their policy. They're going to put them in trailers, and then someone's going to shoot him. Well, the horse is going to move its head, and this is what happens in a slaughter plant. And please watch it, because it's so important. Now, I'm not going to show the actual shoot, because this is a time when I only show this at my 10 o'clock program, but this is a program where more of you will be watching. So you're not going to see the horse die, but you are going to see the horse in anticipation, how he moves his head, and how the person with the stun gun wants to come up and shoot him and has a hard time doing so because of the movement of the head. That's all I want to show you. You're not going to see anything else, all right? So even though you should be watching this because you're eating meat and you're a part of this, I'm going to spare you that. You can go on YouTube, type in Twyla Francais slaughter plants, and you'll come up with all the gruesome sights. So let's warrior up now and watch this. So you can see the horse moving its head, and now it slips. Now it's slipped on the slippery, bloody floor, and so it's kind of panicking a little bit there, and it's trying to get up again. But the whole point of this is to show you how the horses move their head at the slightest provocation. So BLM plans to restrain these horses with a halter, and then the man is going to shoot. So now you can see he's kind of looking, trying to get a good shot. And here you have another horse. This horse, as you can see, looking around and looking sad, you can tell it knows something horrible is going to happen. It's trying to trust. And here this man is coming up and trying to get a nice, but the head's moving. And this is what's going to happen with BLM. You know, the same thing, your tax dollars going to murdering our wild horses. And is there anyone out there, how many Americans are going to step up to the plate, folks? Step up to the plate and say no to Trump. How many of you are going to call him and say, I do not want my tax dollars going towards this atrocity? How many of you are going to be able to do that? How many of you are going to be able to give up meat on public lands and not go to Safeway and not buy all that easy meat there on the counter? How many of you are going to be true warriors and say, I'm only going to buy from private ranchers? And I'm going to go on the internet in my particular area, and I'm going to look up private ranchers. Now, I'm here in Monterey, so I did it. I went up to, here's the private ranchers. Here's a private rancher in Petaluma, Terra Firma Farms, and they grow their beef on private lands. These are the cattle ranchers that you need to support so that our public lands are free for wildlife, because the ranchers are the ones that are taking away all of our wildlife on public lands, including the wild horses and burros, including every grazing animal that competes with their grazing ability. And they're destroying our wild horses. We need to say to the BLM, we need to say to our Congress people, we want our wild horses returned. We want the 22 million acres of the 53 million acres that was originally given back to them under herd areas, and not this nebulous herd management area fiasco that the BLM has committed. Now remember, the BLM is a criminally run organization, and I say that because they have been caught selling wild horses to a no-and-kill buyer and taking 140,000 of our tax dollars to ship them to Tom Davis, a no-and-kill buyer. So having said that, the Office of Inspector General did a report on this, and they suspect thousands more have gone that way. Whistleblowers are saying that BLM is now shooting them in pits. I have whistleblowers that tell me that from the BLM, and they remain anonymous. So you see, folks, we cannot let our nation become a nation of zombies that just eat dead animals all the time, and they have no care for anything. Please don't be one of them. Be active, be a warrior, and when you do that, the karma is going to come back to you. It's going to come back to you in so many wonderful ways. First of all, you're going to feel better about yourself. And secondly, you're not going to be so susceptible to mad cow and Alzheimer's and heart disease and strokes and all the things that meat has been proven to cause. And then you're not going to have so much, the health system isn't going to be so broken down because so many of us are ill all the time. And it all comes back to us, folks. And the horses are our spiritual messengers. God gave us the horses. They rode us through history on their backs. So whether you believe in God or the infinite creation or the Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it, we're all connected. And what we do to the animals, we do to ourselves. And that's a fact. So please, please warrior up for these animals and make sure that you contact your congressperson. Remember, $124 million a year are made to kill our wildlife. And you know who does that? The ranchers. They lobby your Congress members and they tell them, oh, we can't afford to graze our animals on our private ranches. We have to use the public lands, and those public lands are for us. Well, yes, that's true. Under multiple use they are. But under the Taylor Grazing Act, the cattle already get the lion's share of our public lands. They get 152 million acres, and the horses only get now 30 something million, because 22 million was taken away from them illegally without any kind of congressional approval. And so the BLM that is totally influenced by the cattle industry, that's the way it's going. And now they go, we can't afford to keep these horses anymore, and so we have to destroy them. And we're going to destroy them in trailers, and it's going to be humane. And this is what Trump is saying. It's going to be humane, folks. Well, this is what humane looks like. They can't shoot the dime-sized mark, and so they have to shoot again and again. So are you going to let that happen? Now, I'm not going to show you this. I stopped it right there, but you can go on YouTube and type in horse slaughter and see for yourselves. See for yourselves, folks. And the BLM is going to tell you, well, you need a vet's approval that gunshots are humane. Yeah, they're very humane if you get the dime-sized mark on the head and the horse isn't moving. It is a very humane method. But how many horses that's not going to happen to them? So we would rather see our money spent returning these horses, the 13,000 in holding, which cost $127,000 of taxpayers a day. We would rather them return those horses to the original herd areas, as well as anywhere else in America where deer and antelope roam. Why not let the horses go there? Have you noticed when you go across America, all you see is cattle? Do you see an abundance of bison, of wildlife, of wild horses, of any of those thrilling animals that we so once longed for and would like to see? No, you see Angus cattle. That's it. So now I'm going to show you a roundup, and I want you to look at the landscape. BLM is saying that the landscape is barren of all their food because the horses are destroying everything. That's not true. As I've explained before, horses fertilize the earth. They don't digest the seeds, so in their manure, new seeds grow. Cattle do digest seeds, so they don't propagate the earth. They came from Eurasia, and that's where they belong ecologically. And so we have to fight for our horses. We have to fight for making America beautiful and great. And that means millions of you calling and saying, no, you do not want our tax dollars going towards eradicating wildlife. We want our wild horses returned. That's what we want. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you send a big message to the meat industry that you're not going to buy their meat. You're only going to buy from private ranchers that are doing the right ecological thing. And if it's too much energy for you to pick up the phone and call someone like these private ranchers that are doing the right thing and say, yeah, where can I buy your meat? Then America, we are no longer great. As a people, we are no longer great. We're just zombies, basically. And that's what the meat industry is turning us into, these walking, gobbling, kind of very obese, non-thinking, non-caring people that don't want to think about anything but what's going into their stomachs next. So prove me wrong, and please contact your Congress member. So there's the number. Ask them to co-sponsor the SAFE Act. Tell them you saw this program and you're horrified of what's going on with the horses. Okay, this is Ely Roundup that I actually went and witnessed. It was 12 below zero weather. The BLM was saying the horses were starving. So you're going to we were able to film this little catch. Oh, there's the horses.
The horse.
Now look.
Yeah.
The what? Now look how healthy. Look how healthy. Look how healthy they are. Beautiful wild horses, 2 of them. And the BLM is saying, oh, well, they're starving. Well, in the wintertime, yes, horses do lose weight. That's just natural in nature. And if they're starving, why are they cruelly running them in 12 below zero weather for 15 miles or more? 7 of these horses that they rounded up died. You know, they round them up in these cruel ways, folks, because they know they're going to slaughter. That's what they're doing. They're secretly sending them off to slaughter, and they've been already caught at it. So we know they're sending more. Whistleblowers are following their trucks to Canada. And the animal angels are also, talking about the skewed paperwork and all that. So this criminally run organization is using your tax dollars just to eradicate every last horse. And they're saying there's 30,000 left. We have no idea because there's no real head count and we can't trust the BLM. So here's an example of some lovely free horses on that early morning dawn in Ely, Nevada, 2012. And the lies BLM perpetuates. And it was so sad that that this tragedy is happening all over the United States when these horses should be part of the landscape and will fertilize and enrich the soil. In it, you're going to see these beautiful horses running down the landscape, frisky and full of it, full of spirit, full of fire. Wouldn't it be wonderful if America had wild horses in all the wild places, and elk and deer, instead of just empty landscape and Angus cattle? And that's what's happened as a result of your meat karma. And so supporting the private ranchers and contacting your Congress member and showing them you care, what makes America great is its beautiful wild places and its beautiful wild animals. And horses are a part of that. And they need to be protected by you, citizens. So now I'm going to show you, this was footage that I took in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And why I want to show you this, excuse the blue halo, but we're not able to kind of get it any better than that, unfortunately. The reason I want to show you this piece is the ranchers are saying, oh, the horses are trampling all the plants. So in Battle Mountain, where they removed all those horses you see in the background, that was the largest herd we could find. It was only about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There was 11 there. The horses, they don't step on the plants. That's the kind of ecologists these horses are. And so they step right next to the plant, and their hoof prints leave indentations in the soil so that when the rain comes, it doesn't cause runoff. It fills these little cups that then feed the plants around it. That's how wonderful horses are. And then when they eat these plants, the seeds are reseeded in the manure. And that's the big lie that BLM and the ranchers are telling everyone, that, oh, these horses are overpopulated and they're destroying the environment. Believe me, if there was no people on earth anymore, there would be millions of horses, because that's what nature wants. Look at Africa before we came and destroyed Africa. There was millions and millions of elephants and millions of giraffes and millions of everything. So it's the big lie. Nature wants abundance. That's how it re-fertilizes the soil. It doesn't want just these tiny isolated little herds and then they say, oh, we got to remove them. So I'm hoping that you will push for, let the horses populate the landscape, let them be free like the deer, like the antelope, and that's what I want my tax dollars going for. So having said that, let's watch this. Thank you for watching. Cabin Valley Horse Herd Management Area in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And you're looking at some of your wild horses. Now, I'm looking for trampled bushes, folks, because that's one of the things the ranchers are saying, that the horses trample the bushes, but I can't see any. I'm really looking hard. I see a footprint here, right here, but it just missed this little bush here. Okay, I would like to just remind you folks that that little footprint there is an indentation in the soil that feeds that plant water when water and moisture come. That's how incredibly ecological these animals are. Now cattle, they step right on the bush. And they also, when they feed, they don't have any upper teeth, so they curl their tongue around the plant and they often pull up it by the roots. And their stomachs digest the seeds, so they don't regenerate the seeds and the food. This bush is intact. All these bushes are intact. If you get my meaning. If you get my drift. Again, here's a hoof print, but it's not on the vegetation itself. Here's another hoof print, but it's not on the vegetation, is it? And all around are hoof prints, but they're not on the vegetation. Do you see what I'm trying to? Do you see what I'm trying to point out to you? The big lie that they're destroying the environment, they're trampling down vegetation. Well, I point out to you all these footprints and all these bushes around intact. We are gathering evidence to see whether what they're saying is true. And this is one of the big factors. So, having tried to prove to you how important it is that horses are here for the ecology, I leave you with this, the Teo saying, it's chapter 46, and in the book of Teo it says that when the world is living in Teo, the horses will be led to fertilize the fields. When the world does not live in Teo, war horses will be bred in the suburbs. And that's what's happening. Our world is becoming explosive, and there's wars all over the planet now. And our country so far has been untouched in the sense that it's not multiple daily explosions like it is in Afghanistan and Iraq, all these countries that we've invaded for our resources, for our need for gas and oil so that we can drive our big, big cars that consume so much of these resources. And it's all because of that. And so it's going to happen to us too. There's no stopping it. And there's no stopping terrorism. There's no stopping it because these so-called terrorists from other countries are just people trying to defend their country just like we try to defend our country. It's all about that, folks, nationalism. And so having said that, I just hope that you will contact private ranchers and that we'll send a big message to the cattle industry and let them know that you are no longer going to eat any beef that's sold in supermarkets, and you're going to do your part and contact your congressperson and contact Trump and let him know you do not want him to kill and euthanize humanely by gunshot with your tax dollars our wild horses and burros. You want them set free where they belong, and you want the BLM to stop rounding up these wild horses, and you want the BLM to no longer have control over our wild horses and burros. It needs to go to a citizens advisory committee group where wonderfully known horse activists are in charge of this. And I know that organization and Novak, because she does not want to go along with BLM's program to sterilize these horses or to allow them to go into humane, so-called humane euthanasia. And she believes, like I believe, that these horses, our wild horses, need to be returned to the land. And so it's very important that you visit her site. And these are all the horses that are now have 3 strikes against them. These are wild horses rounded up by BLM. They're older horses, so BLM says, well, we can't find homes for them, so we're going to have to send them to slaughter. Well, it's illegal under the provisions of the Omnibus Bill 2017. BLM cannot sell any wild horses to slaughter. And that's the rule. But BLM sidelines it, as they've already been found guilty of that. So this is a letter to Secretary Ryan Zink, U.S. Department of Interior. Dear Secretary Zink, we are focusing on proactive solutions to ensure all American wild horses and burros will be safe. Right now, we are working with many people, organizations, and tribes who want the 3 strikes wild horses and burros. Where have they all gone? The Bureau of Land Management's own Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Board recommend to kill all the wild horses and burros in holding is outrageous and cruel, and it is illegal. The public is against killing, and this is her petition signed by more than 221,000 people. And so I hope you you donate to her, because the other horse groups, are attacking her now because Anne does not believe that these horses need to be PZP'd, which means that they can no longer have foals. And she, like I, believe that horses are part of the landscape and they're part of the ecology, and that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the truth. And these other organizations have all gone along with BLM, in my opinion, because they are afraid that if they don't do so, BLM is going to kill these horses anyway. But BLM is not allowed to kill these horses with our tax dollars. It's still the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act. Sure, after 1 year, a person can buy a horse, and if he doesn't like that horse, he can sell it at an auction, and then it can go to a kill buyer. And that is a loophole that right now needs to be put in the provision that is now going towards the states. Now the states are trying to say, oh, give the horses to us and we'll make them working horses. Well, excuse me, if you're going to do that provision, and why don't you instead just make that loophole that allows for horses after 1 year of ownership being sold to anyone, including a kill buyer, that a horse can never, ever go to a kill buyer. And that's what this so-called provision is, which the HSUS, the Humane Society of the United States, is said that they're working with the lawmakers to make happen, and that each horse will be watched over all its lifetime. Well, how much money is that going to be? Why isn't the HSUS instead working with the Congress to say, no, just tighten the loopholes in the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act? And they're not doing that. And I've questioned them, I've asked them to get back to me, and they haven't so far, and we don't have time. So in my opinion, the HSUS has been greatly influenced by the cattle ranchers. I know I first was alerted by the HSUS in one of their animal magazines. They had on the cover a big expose that, oh, the horses were overpopulated and they needed to be managed. Well, why weren't they asking for an independent head count at that time? They didn't. And so I contacted the HSUS and I've asked them why they are not instead working with our Congress members to ensure that there is no slaughter in this country, and that wild horses and burros are protected even more so under the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act, so that even after a year they cannot ever be sold to a kill buyer, and that each horse is watched over the rest of its life, which is what this provision is in the omnibus of 2018. So I know this is all confusing to you, but folks, it's so important we save our horses. It's so important we save our wildlife. It's so important we become better than people who are just obese on eating dead animal. And that's what's happening to us. We're becoming these kind of zombie-like creatures, obese and eating burgers at McDonald's and Burger King, all these babyish names, you know, and Jack in the Box. It's all about babying us down and dumbing us down so that we don't really pay attention to anything. And guess what? Then it happens to us. Our karma, the health care. Now, under Trump's proposal, the health care is that the elderly are going to pay the higher premiums and the rich don't have to pay the higher premiums. And all the broken promises that Trump made during his election time, that they weren't going to take out those provisions of pre-existing diseases that we may have had. So we're not going to be able to afford health care. You see, what you do to the animals comes back to you, folks. It comes back in karma. That's just the way the wheel of karma works, whether you want to believe it or not. So now you have a president who is saying, oh, yes, we got to kill all the wild horses because we can't afford to keep them. My God, to bring back coal, and we got to take away solar incentives, and we got to do this and that. And I don't believe in climate change, and I don't believe in acidification of the rain of the oceans, which is 70% of the oxygen. You know, the oceans produce 70% of the oxygen on our planet, and so the little skeletal phytoplanktons are fish. And all the little skeletal structures of the phytoplankton won't be able to produce our oxygen. You see the karma? And meanwhile, we're just guzzling down fish, tons of fish, all this, you know, mindlessly consuming, mindlessly getting obese, mindlessly not caring. It's all coming back to us, folks. So it starts with the wild horses. It starts with saving our oceans, not eating the fish, eating plant-based diets. That's what it starts with, and that's what it ends with. So what you're going to do watching this program is you're going to get educated, and you're going to call Trump, and you're going to say, President Trump, I don't want my tax dollars going towards killing our wild horses. And my vocation of that is, even though I'm a meat eater, I'm not going to eat any meat that's bought on public lands. That's going to be my commitment. I'm going to look on the internet in my area for private ranchers, and I'm going to support them because they're the good ones. They're the ones who are helping to save the planet. They're the ones that are ecology-wise doing the best thing they can. So let's go and educate ourselves now why it's so important that we have a plant-based diet. Okay? Stick with me on this. Really appreciate you watching, because those of you who are watching are the ones that change the world. You're the planet savers. You're the only ones that I'm interested in educating.
So if you love animals, if you're concerned about the environment, if you want to be healthy, if you want to feed the world's hungry, then I'd ask that, you know, just please place any prejudices you may or may not have aside and listen. I'm not going to swindle you. I'm not going to make up any figures because I don't have to. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Emily Moran Barwick. I am an activist, an artist, and an educator. I created the YouTube channel and website Bite Size Vegan, and I attempt to educate people about veganism in friendly and digestible vegan nugget videos, is what I call them. So since we're at a vegan festival, I'm going to assume that everyone here is either a vegan, interested in becoming vegan. You might have been brought here by a family or a loved one, or you got lost in the woods and you just kind of ended up here. So this isn't like a test or a judgment or a time to kind of like look around and see what everyone answers, but just for my own knowledge to kind of shape my talk, can I just get a show of who is already vegan? Now I know who to glare at in contempt. It's a few of you. I'm just kidding. So I'm hoping that this talk will be effective for non-vegans and vegans alike. If you are vegan, I might still talk about things that you're not, familiar with, or maybe in a different way than what you're familiar with, or perhaps help you learn ways to talk to non-vegans about veganism. If you are non-vegan, I'm not here to impose anything, upon you or force anything upon you. I'm here to kind of to help show what's really going on, and I would say that I'm here, if I can be so presumptuous, to help you live the values that you already have. Most people identify themselves as animal lovers, and even I think up to 60% of Americans identify themselves as environmentalists. And most people are concerned with their health and living a long, healthy, happy life, and I would think most people are also concerned about world hunger. So not only does veganism align with all of these values, but it's our only hope for fixing the crises that are inherent within all of these things. So if you love animals, if you're concerned about the environment, if you want to be healthy, if you want to feed the world's hungry, then I'd ask that, just please place any prejudices you may or may not have aside and listen. I'm not going to swindle you. I'm not going to make up any figures because I don't have to. I'm going to be transparent with you. If I don't know something, I will tell you that, because believe it or not, vegans don't know everything. I know that we like to sometimes think we do. So there are 4 main reasons that people go vegan, and we're going to touch on each one a little bit. There's, the health impact, which I'm only going to briefly address because there's many people here at this festival who can speak to this far better than I can. There's environmental impact. There's the sociological or human impact, and there's the moral or ethical impact. So before we start, I'm gonna be throwing out some numbers to help you kind of grasp the enormity of what it is that we're talking about today, and I'm gonna see if you guys can try to match what they represent. If you're not a numbers person, don't worry, because we're going to talk about things that aren't all, numbers based. So because it's really difficult for us to wrap our heads around incredibly large numbers, we're going to do just a quick comparison. So 1 million seconds, if you've seen my videos, I've talked about this, is 12 days. So 1 billion seconds would be, what, like 24, 48? Anyone have a guess? 31 years. So 1 trillion seconds is, don't worry, I would not be able to do this in my head, 31,688 years. So you can see that there's an exponential difference between these numbers, I think, and sometimes it's really difficult for us to conceptualize that. So now that we've got a bit of a scale to work from here are some figures. So we're gonna kind of see what applies to these. So one of these is the number of humans killed in wars in all of human history, every single war. Anyone have a guess which one this is?
What the number is?
Yeah, which one that?
619.
It's 1 billion. Okay, and then the number of chickens killed in the United States in the year 2013. So one country, 1 year.
1 billion.
It's 8.6. We've got the number of people starving in the world right now. That's 795 million. And the number of people we could currently feed with the food that we're creating right now this second.
Probably the largest number you have on there.
Almost. It's actually 10 billion. So we could feed 10 billion. The majority of that is, or half of that is going to the animals that we consume. So the number of gallons per year for fracking in the United States, which is the big environmental evil of...
107.6. Yeah.
50.
It's the 70 to 140 billion gallons every year in America. Number of gallons per year for animal agriculture in America.
34.76.
Yeah, so that some of these have a pattern. And this is trillion, and again, remember that's a big difference there. And then we have the percentage. These are kind of gimmies. Percentage of CO2 emissions from all global transportation, like trains, planes, automobiles. 13%, the entire world. So of course the CO2 emissions for animal agriculture, 51. Now we've got number of humans to ever exist in the history of our entire species ever. Yep, 107.6. So that leaves the number of fish we kill every single year, 2.8 trillion. So we can see here that we kill 2.7 trillion more fish every year than all humans that have ever existed, and that's a number that still escapes our comprehension. Like, there's just no way to cognitively understand what that even implies. 7.6 billion more chickens are killed in a single year in a single country than all humans who ever died from war. We have more than enough food to feed everyone in the world right now, but globally we give around half our crops to the animals that we eat. Animal agriculture is using between 486 to 1,000 times more water than fracking and is the leading cause of climate change. So as a species, we can see here we're killing our planet, we're killing trillions of other beings, and we're killing ourselves. And while eating animals may not cause all of the evils in the world and the problems, its impact reaches far beyond our dinner plates, as you can see here. So we're going to take a look at the four main reasons for veganism separately, and I'm going to do my best to address common questions and objections, because my hope is that you'll find that even if you're not vegan, veganism is consistent with your own ideals and morals already. Most likely it's very, very close to your core beliefs as you are right now. As a note, I just want to let you guys know I'm not going to be showing anything overtly graphic in this presentation. There will be some images that might be sad and possibly disturbing, but nothing's going to pop out at you and nothing's going to be terribly graphic by any means. So most of us want to be good people. We do our best, you know. Most of us would never want to violently harm an innocent being or cause others unspeakable pain. Most of us don't want to destroy the planet or literally take food from the mouths of starving children. You know, these are not actions that most of us would condone or jump at the chance to participate in. Yet most of us, and by this I mean the human race, are doing exactly this. You know, and I honestly believe that the vast majority of people who consume animals and their byproducts are not doing so out of malice or inherent evil, but out of ignorance of the truth. And that's why I've dedicated, you know, my life to helping people see these realities. Because if we truly want to live according to our values and be the good people that we strive to be, we must educate ourselves about the truth and make decisions that are based on facts rather than fantasy. So we're going to dive into some facts. Again, if you're not a numbers person, bear with me through a couple figures. We're going to get to some non-number stuff as well, because everyone learns differently. So we're going to start with something most people can get behind, and that's solving world hunger. Not everyone is an animal activist or even believes that animals should have equal rights to humans. Not everyone even really cares about the environment, but most people seem to agree that starving children deserve to eat. So we've all seen the commercials where you can donate, you know, $1 to feed a child in some developing country. The reality is the reason that these children don't have food is because the food's going to the animals that then we as a race are consuming. As I said in our numbers game, we currently grow enough food to feed 10 billion people. And that means the world's population and then even more. The United States alone could feed 800 million people with the grain that we currently feed to our livestock. So the problem isn't a lack of food. The problem is that we're feeding our food to our food. If the world adopted a vegan, plant-based diet, you know, we'd have world hunger solved. And it's pretty simple, really. And if we do care about the starving people of the world, we need to stop stealing their food to feed our food and just eat the plants that we are already making. So this brings me to the really only health point that I'm going to make. As I said, there are experts here and medical experts that you can find online who are far more skilled in this area than I am. I do have an entire vegan nutrition series on my channel with the wonderful Dr. Michael Greger of nutritionfacts.org. If you want to reference that for more information, that will also be on the resource sheet for this talk. But a simple way of looking at the health aspect, particularly when it comes to concerns about not getting X, Y, or Z nutrient, is that when we eat animals, we are filtering our nutrition through them. So we're eating what I like to call hand-me-down nutrition. And with hand-me-downs always comes wear and tear and weird smells. So what I mean is that when someone asks, like, where do you get your protein if not from meat? Or where do you get your dairy if not from, you know, milk? What I like to ask people is, where did, you know, the meat get its protein from? And where did the dairy cow get her calcium from? Invariably, the answer is plants. And when we try to get these nutrients through the animals, we're getting a lot more than we bargained for. You know, we're also getting the fat, we're getting the cholesterol, we're getting the acid-forming compounds that wreak havoc on our bodies. So let's just cut out the middle animal and go to the source. And so that's, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about with health. But now we're going to talk just briefly on the environmental aspect as well. I have a whole video that breaks this down in great detail with a lot of numbers and snarkiness called Everything Wrong with Environmentalism. That will also be linked for you to check out later. In short, though, our planet is in crisis. We cannot sustain the way that we're eating. Animal agriculture, as we talked about, is the leading cause of climate change. As we saw, it's responsible for up to 51% of CO2 emissions compared to the 13% of all global transportation. It also uses a third of the Earth's fresh water, up to 45% of the Earth's land. And it's responsible for an incredible 91% of Amazon destruction, with 1 to 2 acres being cleared every second for animal agriculture. It's also one of the leading causes of species extinction, ocean dead zones, and habitat destruction. So the efforts that we make to recycle or shower less are rather insignificant in comparison when we really look at this impact. So something astounding, a single pound of beef takes 2,500 gallons of water to create and 16 pounds of grain, which is where our food is going, as we've learned. So using the average American consumption of dairy and eggs for the year 2000, which was the most current year with the most thorough data that I could find, to match the water savings alone, not even talking about other aspects of being vegan for 1 year, you would have to not shower at all for 66 years if you took daily 15-minute showers, or close to 100 years if you took daily 10-minute showers, both with water-saving shower heads. And this isn't even getting in depth with species extinction, land and water pollution, the Amazon rainforest destruction, and all the other ways that animal agriculture is decimating our planet. But here's the takeaway from the environmental reasoning for veganism. We've reached a point beyond personal choice, beyond you eat how you want to eat and I'll eat how I want to eat. This is a global crisis, and it's not about you or me anymore. We say that children are our future, but what future can they have when we're eating the planet to death? So the world cannot sustain meat, dairy, and egg production. It just simply can't. And this isn't propaganda. It's a truth that's even more inconvenient than Al Gore. So the solution to this, luckily, is so simple. I mean, it's something that every single person can do. We may not be able to single-handedly stop oil drilling in Alaska or get companies to cut their carbon emissions, but each and every one of us can choose what we put in our bodies and where we spend our money. So we can literally save the planet one meal at a time, and that's pretty mind-blowing. It's a people's revolution in the purest sense of the word. So now I'd like to move into what I personally find the most important aspect of veganism, and that's the moral and ethical impact. As a species, we have a very large and an impressively resilient disconnect with how our food is made. We may understand, of course, that hamburgers come from cows and bacon comes from pigs, but what that actually entails, we prefer to keep in the dark. So our reasons are many, but the main ones seem to be that we have to eat animals and byproducts because of their nutrition, or that it's natural for us, it's written in our genes, it's in our biology, our ancestors ate meat, look at my canines, all of those, or that, animals eat other animals and it's the circle of life. If you can go fell a gazelle with nothing but your bare hands and teeth, then yes, eating meat is natural for you. If you can bite into the hide of a living cow and enjoy the blood, the lymph, the fat, the bones, the tendons, then yes, eating meat is natural for you. If you see roadkill and you get the munchies, then yes, perhaps eating meat maybe you're meant to eat meat. But we have to look at how we eat animals. We have to hide the whole process. We only interact with sterilized, disguised, packaged remnants, and then we cook it, we slather it with spices and glazes and all kinds of crap, and then we think to ourselves, how primal am I? I'm so in touch with my ancestors. And maybe that's not you. Perhaps you don't agree with factory farming, and you only eat, the cage-free eggs and the grass-fed beef. Within all of these reasons lies the heart of our disconnect.
Unfortunately, we have to close. Stay tuned for part 2. This is a great speech. You can get it on YouTube. And please call Trump and tell him you don't want our wild horses and burros killed. You want them returned to the land where they belong. And these are all the reasons why. Thanks for watching Meet America. I'm Annie Griffin, your host.